Straight talk from Israel. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
All right, we are back at the Tamar Yona Show on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com, and we're talking about astrology. Is it kosher even to look at your horoscope? We have joining us on the show Rabbi Elyahu Kin. He is the rabbi of the Sephardic community in Los Angeles, and he's the rabbi of Congregation Or HaChaim. He received his smicha, or rabbinical ordination, from the famous Rav Avadia Yosef, Zichrono Livracha. Rav Kin is originally from Brazil, but has also lived in Mexico and Israel. Rabbi Kin lectures in English and several other languages. Many of his lectures are available on YouTube on the 7200 Beverly channel. Rav Kin's lectures focus on everything from basic Torah to Talmud, Halacha, and Kabbalah, or Jewish mysticism. His time is devoted between counseling, lecturing, and kiruv, or bringing secular Jews back to Torah observance. And everything he does is for free, and you can visit his website at torahaor.net. And we will link to his website from ours where this show is podcasted. So welcome to the show, Rabbi Elyahu Kin.
It's nice to be with you again.
So let's start out with the whole idea of astrology in general. A lot of people say it's avodah zarah. It is idol worship. It's not believing in God. It's actually another type of worship. Would you agree with that? How would you explain it?
I think a lot of people misunderstand what astrology is. It has partially to do with the term used in the past for astrology, and that was kochavim u'mazalot. Avodat kochavim u'mazalot, which is another term to describe avodah zarah, or idol worshiping. But it is a lot more than that. Astrology encompasses various areas, one dealing with one's destiny and fate, and one dealing with human behavior and the composition of human character. And the two are very different. One is permissible and allowed and sometimes even encouraged to gain a better understanding of what human beings are made up of. However, there is a danger in using astrology to determine one's future, one's destiny and fate, because that could lead to avodah zarah. Avodah zarah, meaning idol worshipping in itself, is of course forbidden by the Torah, and the Torah lists quite a few types of forbidden practices that deal with divination or predicting the future. Divination in itself, however, is not prohibited. It is the means or the mechanism used to obtain that information which is a problem. And Torah was, of course, concerned that the Jews should not adopt practices used by the non-Jewish world that would lead him astray and disconnect him from God. We have no use for that kind of knowledge unless it's the type of astrology that I usually focus on, and that deals with human behavior or human relationships.
Okay, we're going to get to that, but I want to find out, what are the roots of the horoscope, astrology, the zodiac? Where did this knowledge even come to mankind?
That's a very good question. Where does all knowledge that deals with mysticism come from? It is not scientific per se that we can prove. We don't know all the rules that govern it. My guess is that it's divine. In other words, the information was given to us from a divine source, whether it was through angels or through demons. And it could be through all kinds of means that were obtained in the past that we're not familiar with, which our forefathers were more familiar than we are. So how exactly it began, we do not know, but we do know that Abraham Avinu, for example, Abraham, was an astrologer. He was very knowledgeable in this knowledge base.
Can you give us an example for when Abraham, our forefather, used astrology?
Sure. The Midrash, for example, describes how Abraham Avinu looked at his chart, if we can call it so. He was familiar with his sign, he was familiar with his destiny, and he saw that he would not have any children according to his mazal, as we call it. And God tells him, just ignore the mazal. I can raise you above the mazal. I can add a letter to your name and your whole mazal will change. So,
can you translate mazal for our listeners?
Mazal can be translated as fate or destiny. You know, so everyone has a certain destiny.
Or even luck.
Well, luck, yeah, but luck is a little bit different. The mazal, right, or one's destiny, or goral as it's called in Hebrew, is determined by the moment of birth. And Abraham Avinu, the Midrash says, knew it very well. He knew that according to the mazal in which he was born, he would not have children. And God tells him, just ignore that. I can make changes to your mazal. By changing your name, I will elevate you above the mazal. So you don't need to be concerned about your mazal. And that is clearly stated in the Midrash. That's a good source of astrology for those who think that it's just something that came along later on. It was around for a long time.
And isn't it true that there is a mazal for individuals like Abraham, but also a mazal for nations?
That is correct, yes. That is a whole different type of astrology that deals with mundane astrology. The mazal, or the astrology that governs nations. The astrology that most people are more familiar with and that really concerns them more is the individual astrology, how their life is influenced by the moment of birth. That is really the more significant and the more relevant astrology that we can get some help from. By becoming more familiar with our mazal, we can gain a better perspective and greater clarity as to what our mission in life is and how people are so different in various ways, all of us with weaknesses and strengths. That is the more important type of astrology, and that is completely permissible according to the halakha.
But what about people who say, well, I can't help it because I was born under this sign and this is the way I am, and so if God made me this way, then there's nothing, people could easily give up or just excuse their behavior on, well, that's what the stars say, I have no power.
Yes, and that was one of the concerns the Maimonides had. The Rambam had this concern. A lot of people misunderstand his position in astrology. He was quite familiar with it, but he lived during the time where there were two opposing camps in Islam, one called Qadariya and the other one called Jabariya. One held very, very much that there's something called predestination and that you cannot change, you have no free will, and one did say that you have complete free will and you can be whatever you want. And therefore he was concerned that Jews would think along those lines, and they would say, well, I'm just born like that, it's not my fault and I am not responsible for my action. So he very much cooled people off from immersing themselves or following this type of belief in astrology, even though the sources in the Talmud and the Zohar are clearly pointing that there is something like that. But he was concerned that the people, Jews especially, would be led astray or would lose hope, and therefore he made fun of this. And of course he was right to do so, because we do have free will. And I'd like to point out a very important idea where Judaism is very, very helpful in clarifying an important detail in astrology. The non-Jewish world really has a tremendous dilemma between predestination versus free will. Do we have free will, or is everything predestined? There are two opposing camps, and this was an old philosophical debate that lasted forever and is still around. And they don't have a clear answer. We have a clear answer. And the answer is Akol bidei shamayim chutz mirat shamayim. All is in the hand of heaven except for the fear of heaven. We have free will to make certain changes concerning how faithful we are, how loyal, how observant of the mitzvot. Are we going to be kind to others and charitable, or are we going to be mean, cruel, and stingy, and the like? We have no free will and completely in the areas of when we get married, how many children we will have, how much money we will make, what profession we will learn, and so forth. All of those are governed by certain rules that are determined by one's mazal. And therefore, it's a very, very difficult area to explain to certain people how certain things are under our control and that we are responsible for them, and certain things are not. And we cannot do anything about it except, of course, to pray. We can always pray, and that is what God told Abraham. Even if it's something that is not under your control, you can still turn to me, and I can make those changes for you. That is why Judaism very much strongly believes that repentance, prayer, and charity can change a mazal that is already pre-established and predetermined. Even that is possible to change, but it's much more difficult. But what is within our hands, what is within reach, is how much we believe in God, how fearful we are of God, how much we observe His mitzvot, how kind we are, how we get along with our spouse, what kind of a life we will have, how spiritual will we be. That depends on us. That is where reward and punishment comes in.
Okay, so to sum up for this segment, basically what you're saying is that there is, I don't want to use the word power to the stars, but there is something to the stars that can help us define who we are, what kind of tendencies we are born with, what direction we might be going in life, but that people are above the stars. In other words, we can change that, and that is through prayer and through working on our character defects and wanting to put ourselves in the right directions. Right so far?
Yes, pretty much. I will just summarize that briefly, that is, that the stars impel, but they don't compel. And the reason why we need the stars to impel, the reason why God put in such a structure or a system into creation is because it acts like a GPS. Every human being has a mission, and basically is given the tools to succeed in this mission. The tools entail not only who he will marry, but also the characteristics that he will have, the challenges that he will face. All of this is in order for him to succeed in his mission. So he will be driven to do what he needs to do, but he will make many of the decisions.
Wow, that's a great explanation. All right, well, we're going to take a break now. When we get back, I'm going to be asking the rabbi about using our horoscope, the Zodiac, to help us decide what professions to go into, who to marry, etc. Should we be doing this? If so, how? You are invited to call with any comments or questions that you have. We are live if it's between 7 to 8 a.m. Holy Time right here in the land of Israel, or midnight to 1 a.m. New York. We'll be right back. All right, we are back here at the Tamar Yona Show on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. And we're speaking about astrology, the horoscope. The year 2018 has just come in. What does it mean? What do the stars say? Should we even be looking at the stars? And our guest today is Rabbi Elyahu Kin from TorahOr.net. And he's here answering our questions. I want to remind you all that this is a live show. If you're listening between 7 to 8 a.m. Holy Time right here in the land of Israel, or if it's between midnight to 1 a.m. on the Eastern time zone in the United States, that means that we are live and you can call into the show. So, Rabbi, when we left the last segment, basically you established that the stars impel, but they don't compel. Is that correct so far?
Right, that is right.
Okay. So if somebody is born under the sign of Aries, for instance, which is war, it's said that they are people who particularly have a tendency to like blood, and therefore, in order not to be a murderer or someone like that spills blood, they should go into professions like being a surgeon or a butcher or a soldier, etc., etc. What would you have to say about that statement?
No, I would have to totally disagree with that. The Gemara does speak a little bit about elements. In astrology, there is what we know as the element of fire, of water, of air, and earth. And those that have a certain amount of fire in them, or let's say their dominant element. I say dominant because we are all compositions of various elements. Those who have a dominant element, let's say of fire, are more temperamental. They get angry very quickly, but they also calm down quickly. We all have strengths and weaknesses depending on the element, especially the dominant element. So that is partially taken from the Gemara as some advice for one to do whose element is so-and-so. How can he channel that fire that he has in a productive way, in a positive way? But it's too general. That's why I wouldn't say that one should just become a mohel, one that circumcises children, or a butcher, just because he has Mars very prominent, which is what the rabbis describe as one who's not warlike, but the influence of Mars, meaning a little bit of aggressive. And that is just very general, and I wouldn't use that as a basis of advising someone as to what profession he should choose. It's just too general.
Okay. So we've all met people who are, let's say, of the same sign, and yet they're different. And does this happen because of the hour of the day a person is born? And if so, what does it mean? What does it matter what hour of the day you're born?
That's an excellent question, because we have 12 signs, and each sign is unique. But the sign is only the individuality of the person, his aspirations, as he knows himself to be. However, there's the hour, the influence of the hour, as they call it in astrology, the rising sign, the ascendant. And that's a little bit more with the personality, how people see you. And sometimes the two, the hour and the month, are in very different elements, one being fire, the other one being water, which produces a little bit of a dual personality type of person, where he can have a little bit of both, and it's sometimes confusing. A good professional astrologer will be able to point out, this is how you are in your individuality, but this is how people see you, and this is where you see things in a certain way, and this is where at times you feel in a different way, because the feelings have to do with the position of the moon, for example, the temperament. So it can become very complicated. People are unique. Not all individuals born in the same sign are alike. Perhaps 70 to 75% of the characteristic can be seen from a sign itself. The rest depends on other factors. And this is where Judaism comes in. The Jewish perspective in astrology reminds us that there's also something called the day of the week that you were born. There's also something called inherent traits, where many of the children in the family will have more inherent traits from the mother's side of the family. And then, of course, there's the neshama, the unique soul, the unique mission that soul has, which explains why even twins who are maybe similar in some ways can be very, very different in other ways. So Judaism has a lot to offer that just gives more clarity to many of the questions that people have. And one of those, of course, is what you mentioned, the hour of birth, which can make a big difference in how people see themselves or how others see them.
How much should a person look into their zodiac sign and their horoscope? I mean, some people, every single day they open the newspaper to see what their mazal, what their destiny is foretold for that day, and other people don't touch it at all. And then other people say, well, it's very important to use if you're getting married to make sure that this person is going to be a good partner for you, because love can blind people. Other people will use it for their career that they're going to go into. So how often should we be using this?
And these are really separate questions. In answer to your first question about horoscopes, it is forbidden, really, to lead our lives according to the horoscope. A Jew cannot, he's not allowed to lead his life based on certain days and times that may be more propitious, unless the rabbis point out those days. Otherwise, it is forbidden. That is what the Torah forbids us to do, is to run our lives based on certain hours that astrology determines. It's not an exact science. We don't know all the rules, so we can make mistakes. And there's always the danger of it leading us astray. So we don't want to look at horoscopes because it's many, many times false, it's too general, and it's also problematic with the halakha. It is clearly out of bounds. It's not within the limits of what is permissible. However, in speaking about the permissible type of astrology, of relationships, professions, which one am I more geared for, am I more leaning towards, it can be a helpful tool. I say it can be, but you don't have to use it. Some people have clarity. They know they're going to marry this person. They feel good. The chemistry is there. They don't need to consult. The majority of the world does not consult with an astrologer, especially the Jewish world, if they should marry or not. Some Jews like to examine the names. There is some tradition to that. But even that is not necessary. We have to remember as Jews, the Torah says clearly, Tamim tiyeh Hashem Elokecha. Your faith should be complete. You should be sincere in your faith with God. Don't second guess. Don't question. Don't try to figure things out about the future. Just leave it to God. He's the matchmaker. Matches are made in heaven. And therefore, you have to go with, of course, your feelings. You have to investigate, do your homework, and see if this is a good match for you. But obviously, if people are hesitant, they have doubts, they're having a difficult time making up their mind, and they have someone that knows this information, and he could be helpful to them, then perhaps he may be able to encourage them as to what the strengths or weaknesses of such a relationship would be. But in the end, we don't know who's meant for us. Whoever is meant for us is what we call in Yiddish the bashert. And that individual may not be the most compatible person with us, but for some reason we need to marry them. So therefore matches are made in heaven. If we want to have greater clarity as to a profession, that can be helpful. because astrology, especially that deals with character and our inclinations as to what we're inclined to do, where we will excel, that can be helpful and that is not dangerous. But of course, running our lives according to the horoscopes or according to charts as to this is what you should do at this stage in your life, that is dangerous and that is forbidden.
Let's say that a person wants to get a better idea of where they would want to find a career for themselves, and they don't know, and they want to go and look at their star chart. Okay. But by the way, I just want to tell our listeners, I've never done this before. I've stayed away from it. I'm kind of like what the rabbi says, a horse with blinders on it. I just do what God says and go with my feeling, with my gut and knowledge of what I've learned. And that's how I've always run my life. But I know that some people are very into this. And so I want to answer these questions for them. So if somebody is looking for their career, they need some guidance and they want to go to the Zodiac. They want to go to the stars and see where they might be more inclined. How do you know who to go to? How do you know who to trust? I mean, what if you go to a charlatan? How do you find the right person that can, help you?
Yeah, I discourage this most of the time because I myself do not know too many people in the Jewish world, that are familiar with it. And I emphasize Jewish world because even though there are some excellent astrologers in the non-Jewish world who are professionals, nonetheless, in order to get the proper advice, you need one that knows the Jewish perspective. What I have done is I put a whole series on astrology where I go into depth for every single sign from the Jewish perspective. What I've done was I've taken the best information from the best sources and I've filtered them out, filtered that which is not compatible with Judaism and emphasize the more important points that can be helpful to us. So one who wants to have a better understanding of himself or of his partner perhaps would want to listen to these lectures. There's a lecture on every single sign, including an introduction. But as far as getting orientation in life and consulting charts, I don't really know of anyone that I would recommend. I mean, there may be some people out there who may know and may have an idea. Career people, was people who help individuals find a career. How are they called? I think headhunters, who give you an exam to see what personality type you are. This is similar to astrology. It's a little bit more basic, and they may be helpful as well. So I don't think it's so necessary to consult charts. We have a very clear tradition in the Gemara. It's spelled out very clearly. One should not worry about what he's going to end up doing. One's feet are his guarantors. They will take him to where he belongs. They will take him to where he needs to be. He will meet the people he needs to meet. There's no reason to be concerned. I've used only certain aspects of astrology to reinforce certain concepts in Judaism, one of them being how everything is managed from above, how we can see clearly that there's rules, how reincarnation is all connected to this, how everyone contributes in some way, how every human being is important in his unique way.
Hold that thought. Sorry, just the music's on. We have to go to the next segment in just a minute. All right, so what do the stars say, and should we even listen to them? We're speaking with Rabbi Elyahu Kin from TorahOr.net, and he's here talking to us about astrology, the Zodiac, the horoscope, and it's been very, very interesting. So far, basically what I've come away with this is that there is something to what the stars are telling us. However, we can rise above the mazal, we can rise above what they're saying, and we can change things. And the question is, how much should people be looking at these things in order to guide their lives? So I wanted to ask you, Rabbi, I remember when I was single and I was dating, looking to get married, I knew that there were certain people, if they were a water sign, I was much more at ease and attracted to people with those types of personalities, Pisces, Cancer, etc. Yeah. And it was an interesting pattern that almost all the people that I dated were from those signs, and in fact, I ended up marrying a Pisces. So can you explain about the chemistry or lack of between the different signs of the zodiac?
Yes, and this is one of the more fascinating aspects of astrology, is that certain signs get along better with others and others have a harder time. It doesn't mean they can't get along, it's just that it's not as smooth. And that is why I always point out that having knowledge of the signs will help us gain a better understanding of human nature and enable us to learn to be more forgiving and accepting of every human being, no matter how different they are from us. Because they're just different. It doesn't mean they're bad. It doesn't mean they have ill intentions. It's just that we're different. We're not on the same wavelength. However, everyone has their strengths and their weaknesses, and that is what is so beautiful about the signs, that we need every one of them. We need those that have initiative, especially the fire signs. We need those that control the fire, and we need those that know how to extinguish the fire, right? So we need people who are calm, we need people who are emotional and sensitive, who are compassionate and empathize with others. We need those who are more introvert, though more extrovert, more conservative, more social, more rational, more communicative. These are all dependent on the element, on the dominant element of the sign. And obviously those signs that are compatible, that feel a certain chemistry, it's something that subconsciously they will feel as almost the first moment they see each other. They will be able to detect that. By the way, however, it doesn't mean that they will automatically succeed as a couple or in a friendship, because it takes a lot more than just chemistry to succeed. It takes being a mensch, if you know what that word in Yiddish means. Liot ben Adam. You have to be a good person. If you're not going to be a good person, then you can have the best compatible relationship according to astrology and still fail and end up in divorce. And then you have those that are not so compatible, but they're willing to tolerate each other, they're forgiving of each other, and they can live happily ever after. So it really matters what you make of yourself. But of course it helps to be around people who are similar to us or who are compatible to us. It's just a lot smoother. I agree with you.
So people who, I've heard people say things like an air sign and a water sign shouldn't marry because it makes waves. Air and water make waves, and fire and water put each other out. What do you have to say about things like that?
Yeah, remember the famous saying, opposites attract? That's not exactly accurate. Opposites that are in need of each other, that complement each other. So in general, water and fire don't get along. They're very opposite. But remember what we said earlier. If the rising sign of that fire sign is a water or an air, then that will change things. Because if the other individual who's in an opposite element has a compatible rising sign, then they will be able to get along just fine. They'll still have noticeable differences, but they will be able to figure it out and they will be able to get along. So that's why it's not a clear-cut rule set in stone that they will never get along. They will have obvious differences, but listen, even men and women are very different, no matter how compatible they are. So here, obviously, for the most part, I would tend to say that the element of water and earth goes very well, and so does fire and air. But you will find many exceptions, and that is usually because of the rising sign.
There's a question of whether the 12 signs of the Zodiac have anything to do with the 12 tribes of Israel.
Excellent question. Before we forget, I want to remind everyone that your sign is based on your English birthday and your secular birthday, because we need to know the position of the sun at the time of birth. Don't use your Hebrew birthday. The Hebrew calendar is important, of course, for us, but it has nothing to do with astrology. It just happens to be that many times the Hebrew mazal coincides with the astrological mazal, but not always. So if you want to know your mazal, you need to use the position of the sun at the time of birth, which is determined by your secular birthday. And even though there is some correspondence to the 12 tribes, that is more on a Kabbalistic level. And I don't think we have the time to get into that.
Okay, but there is some connection?
Yes, there is. There is definitely a correlation between the Kabbalah and astrology, a very deep correlation, but that is a whole different topic. Sure.
All right. So let's very quickly, we have about 5 minutes left.
Sure.
The strengths and weaknesses that the signs need to work on. You've got fire, earth, water, air, right?
Right.
And so what does this mean?
What I have done in the end of every lecture, pretty much, that's on YouTube and on that website, Torah.net, which, by the way, I'm putting together a new website soon, gives a chart or a table of midot, characteristics that each one may need to work on. Because in the end, we do have the free will and the ability, with proper guidance, to work on refining our character. We cannot change our stripes. We cannot be someone else, but we can control ourselves through Sifrei Musar, by learning books that deal with Jewish ethics and morals, they can be of great help. They're a very powerful tool. A Jew can gain so much by learning Torah. It will provide him with the guidance and the strength that he needs to do battle with the evil inclination. Astrology, of course, will give him the direction too, but will not necessarily give him the remedies. The remedies are in Torah. The remedies are in the strength that we derive from studying Musar, ethics, Jewish ethics and Torah. Otherwise, what you will find from expert astrologers and others are some good tips, but will they guarantee a change in life? Not really. In order to guarantee a change, one has to be tremendous willpower, and that willpower for a Jew is derived from the Torah, from Sifrei Musar. Otherwise, every sign does have certain midot to work on, and for example, water signs have certain sensitivities that they are easily offended, perhaps, that they may need to be careful with, that they don't become easily depressed. The fire signs have to be very careful with managing their anger, for example, consulting with others, because many times they're so overconfident of themselves that they just make many mistakes. So it would help them, even though they definitely are a great source of inspiration for others, but they need to watch out and not rush into a project without thinking it over or talking it over with someone who's a little bit more methodical, organized, and a little bit more conservative. You have the earth signs that can be stingy and overly materialistic, but they're very loyal and very stable people. They're down to earth, they're grounded, they're practical, they're conservative. They don't like changes, however. And sometimes you need to make a change. So you need somebody who's more flexible to motivate them to make the change. And the more flexible ones are the air signs, especially Geminis. The air signs are analytical, they're intellectual, they're friendly, they're thinkers. They can really help, even though they also have their weaknesses. For example, Lashon Hara. They can be gossipers because they love to talk, they love to communicate. They can even lie and sometimes fabricate a story because of their gift of communication. They love philosophical discussions, they love social gatherings, they love reading, but they can be very superficial. They may not be able to have the patience to read a whole book from cover to cover. So you can see that every single element and every sign within that element has their strengths and weaknesses, and we all need each other. Not everybody's thinking of becoming a lawyer, thank God. Not everybody's thinking of becoming a carpenter or a plumber. Everyone's mazal will direct him to what he needs to be, to where he can contribute. As long as we're not lazy, as long as we behave ourselves, hopefully with the help of Hashem, with the help of God, we will succeed in our mission.
So we have 1 minute. How would you like to sum everything up? It's a new year for people on the secular calendar. Go ahead.
I think Solomon sums it up the best in the end of his book, Kohelet, Ecclesiastes. Sof davar hakol nishma et Elohim yirav et mitzvotav shemor ki zeh kol adam. For Jewish people, the bottom line is fear God, because everything that you do, you will be held accountable for. Observe his mitzvot. Ki zeh, that's what man is all about. How much money you make does not matter. You don't take it with you. They're not going to ask you upstairs, how come you didn't make more money? How come you didn't buy more real estate? They're going to ask you, why didn't you maximize your potential? You could have become a better person. You could have refined your character. You could have had a better marital life had you done the right things, had you had more self-control. And that is where astrology could be helpful. But more than that, the Torah is where one can derive the greatest strength and the best direction in how to succeed in life.
So basically you're saying that the stars can tell us things about ourselves and help us know where we need to work harder, what our tendencies are, but it certainly does not rule our lives, that we can rise above it, and we can do that through Torah study, through getting closer to God, through doing the right things, using our common sense and the morals that the Torah teaches us.
Yes, astrology is a powerful tool that can help us as long as we use it with care. That's correct.
All right. So in other words, not as avodah zarah, not as looking at it as this is what it's telling me and I have to do it, but to use our brains and to know that God controls everything, not the stars.
To continuously remember that Hashem is in charge and to turn to Him if we have any difficulties or any challenges that we want to overcome. He will help us as long as we do our best and we make an effort to resolve our problems as well. Then He will help.
This has been a wonderful show. Rabbi Elyahu Kin, again, thank you so much for coming on. You can check out his lectures at 7200 Beverly Channel, and you can visit his website at torahaor.net, which we will link to on our website where the show is podcasted. Thank you again, Rabbi, for coming on the show.
Thank you.